throwing cylinders, there are some tools that you will work with. So first and foremost, the tools. We've got the wooden ribs to work with, and the wooden ribs will help you shape things. I want you to learn the names of the tools so that you know what you're looking for. So wooden rib, flexible rib. So this will actually kind of flex when you're working with it. You can make lots of angles and curves and all that kind of stuff to work. And then you've got the trimming tool. The trimming tool is usually only used the second day to kind of trim up the bottom and make it work. This one, there's no special name to it, it's the wood tool. You can use it to cut into things, you can use it to shape things, and the needle tool. Again, I mentioned this one before, this is the needle tool, not the pointy thing. So if you're looking for a needle tool, ask for it. The sponges that you're using are specifically for throwing. I would use these at all times. I wouldn't use the regular sponges. Reason is, not only are they very, they'll pull water into them really easily, but second thing is that it fits in your hand really easily, especially when you're throwing. You can actually throw with it in your hand at the same time, and it works out really good to add water to it if you need to as you're working. The bats that we're working with, there are two types of bats, the black bats and the brown bats. They're exactly the same thing except for the fact that the black bats have the holes through them. People like them to start out with a lot of times because you can see what you're doing a little bit easier. I know that there's two sides to this. There's a textured side and there's a non-textured side. You want to have the textured side up because it gives another little like fingers to hold it into place. If you work on the smooth side, it's going to come off of there a lot easier as you're working. So make sure textured side up. Here, like I said, you can see through and put them right on there pretty easily. They work great until we start working with plates or platters. If we start working with plates and platters, you get to the point that you can actually throw past the bat pin holes. If you can do that, what happens is when it suctions out of there and it will actually grab onto the clay. So later we won't want to use these. I like the brown bats anyway, so I'm going to use that. There are two holes to things. There are two different sizes of bat pin distances on the wheels. I think I only have one wheel that's actually the small distance, but just look for the correct one. Most of them are the bigger. The bigger are the 3 dots on the side. They're kind of like braille dots on the side. The 3 dots are the bigger, 1 dot is the smaller. So I find where the 3 dots are, put my fingers in on the bat pin holes, and I put my finger especially on the one that's the circle, and I know that one's going on there first. There is an oval here. The oval is just there so that if the bats aren't quite, or the pinholes aren't quite the same distance from each other, it gives a little leeway. So you get the round one on there first, and find where it is, and then I put the other one on. Once you do that, you should be able to grab your bat and go back and forth like this, and it wouldn't be moving. If it's moving, I'll put it on incorrect. If you can do this to it, you don't have the bat on there, and then you're going to be in trouble throwing it. It won't work. So put your fingers on the holes. Get them down onto there, give it a little wiggle, make sure it's actually in the right spot, and then you can start working. The pedal is just like the pedal of a car, except for the fact that you can take your foot off the pedal and it will still run. Highly important to know that and do that because you want to make sure that your weight is going the right direction on this. If you have your foot on the pedal, you're being too cautious and you're trying not to lean on it too hard. So take my foot off so I can lean on that leg really hard. Do I have any left-handed people in here? One? Okay, good. There is one wheel that can go left-handed, so we'll make sure it's that first wheel. So those that are right-handed, stay away from the first wheel, use all the rest of them. The one can go left-handed. The second one is supposed to go left-handed too, but it lost its connection when you plug it the opposite direction. So if you sit down at it and it's going the wrong direction, let me know and I'll replug it again. The reason people just weren't cleaning their hands in between doing it, and it lost a good connection to it. So, all right. Now, this is why this is called throwing, is that I need to connect this down to the wheel. So I'm going to throw it onto there, and you want to actually snap it down on pretty good. Basically, if you can't get used to doing that one-handed, I've gotten used to doing it. If you can't, then set it on there and then put your hands on there and kind of pick it up and slam it back down on there, and that will get a good connection. If you don't, if all I did was walk up, and you can see I have to really kind of twist it off of there to get it to come off. If I didn't and I just set it on there and I started working on this, it would come right off of my hands. So need to make sure that I get it on there. Now if I miss, like dramatically, and I hit it over here, I'm not going to try to start working with that. I'm just going to tear it off and do it again. Because if I do it trying to do this, it's going to throw me all over the place. So I'm going to take it off of there, and notice I'm twisting as I pull off too. That helps it disconnect. If I'm close, like right about there, and you can see it's wobbling quite a bit, I can hit it in. I'm going to get it a little bit closer here. Being a little dramatic and showing this, but okay. So that's close. There's a little bit of a wiggle. So I'm going to move it to here, and I'm going to hit it because this is the side that's out farther. So I'm going to tap it into place. You want to tap it and not push it, because if you push, you're going to end up with it coming off of there too. So I'm going to tap it more into place to start with, and then if I moved it around too much, I give it another hit on the top, and then I'm ready to roll. So that's closer. I've seen people be able to do this when it's moving. I honestly have never been capable of getting that to work out for myself either, so just go ahead and stop it and work it on. So you want to get water. Now, big thing starting out, you need to make sure that your chair is up and touching the wheel, or at least extremely close to the wheel. I have people who will put their chairs all the way back, and especially if they try to sit back in the chairs. Personally, I wish these were stools. I just can't afford to get stools yet, because I don't want you ever touching the back of the chairs. If you're on the back of the chairs, you're way too far back to be able to control the clay. So forward, touching the wheel, scoot forward on the chair and lean into it. Now, the other thing that people forget about is that your elbow has to be in at your side. I'm going to remind you of that several times when you first start throwing. If your elbow is not in at your side, if I can see air between you and the clay, it means you're trying to use your arms to do it. Your arms should not be getting tired doing this. If your arms are getting tired, you're doing the wrong thing. So I'm going to put them in at my side, and I'm going to lean on it. I'm using my whole body to lean on the clay. And I kind of took my other hand. This hand is pushing directly straight through the center of it at an angle, and kind of going straight through. This hand is pushing across from it down at an angle. Notice that my hand went from the bottom and kind of worked its way up over the top. That kind of works the clay into where I need it to be. I'm going to get this out from underneath my wrist too, because if that's under my wrist, it's just going to keep pushing my wrist up and down, and I'm not going to be able to center it either. So get that out from there. I'm going to push in, push down with my thumb. My thumb is going across the center of this, and the heel of my hand, which is right here, the heel of my hand needs to kind of press too. Now, I just made that, centering that, look very easy. This is the hardest thing you're going to do, is learn to center. Once you've learned to center, you will get this figured out. But before you get the centering down, you're going to struggle. So make sure that you're really trying to work on that centering. Even I can throw really well, but if I start trying to throw with this without centering it, I will not be able to throw a nice piece with this. I have to get it centered before I start out. So sometimes people get tired and they're like, whatever, I'm just going to start into it. You got to get that centered. Now, once you get used to this, you lean your body against it, get your fingers to stop moving, and then you let go slow. It should only take about 3 seconds to center once you get used to it. But until you do, it will take a little while. But once you have it centered, then don't keep trying to recenter it. I sometimes have people I look over once and they're all centered and life is good, and then I look back 10 minutes later and they're still centering. So you need to make sure once you have it centered, you start working with it then. So get it centered. Always let go slow. Like I said, if I push in here and I get it centered and I let go fast, there's a wobble that's left over. I need to make sure I push in until my hand stops moving, and then I let go slow. I kind of lean back and let go at the same time as I let go of it, and then I can start working with it. So Now I'm going to open it up. I'm going to put my thumbs. I usually kind of work them in towards the center so I see where the true center of it is. Leave a little pattern that comes behind. So right there is where the center part that I'm going to push in is. There's lots of ways to open this, but I found that this works the best for most people is to have your thumbs right next to each other when they go down in. Your hands are going to hold on to the clay. The only thing is you can't let them twist when they go down in, and it's going to want to twist your hands, so you need to make sure you stay stable so it doesn't twist it. If you let it twist, it's going to let clay go on one side more than the other, and you're going to end up with problems later on. So press them in together. If they're wiggling, I just got control of it again by pressing them together a little bit more at the tips of my fingers. Don't split them when they go down in. They go straight down in together. There's different steps as you work through this. Now, I don't have very long of thumbs, so I can't go very far. I have to then switch to going with my finger down the center of it. But go as far as you possibly can with your thumbs first. Then switch to just the middle finger, and actually my other fingers kind of go up behind it so that it's just the middle finger drilling down into it. If water gets down in there, then I can get some water out with the sponge. I can stop. Try to get used to knowing the height difference between inside to outside, but I've learned throughout time that some people just have better depth perception than others. So if you can't tell the height when you're looking at here, right now I can tell it's about 1/4 of an inch, but I can test it. If I take my needle tool and I run it across my hand with the slip on it and leave some slip behind, then I can push down in and pull back out. And where the little kind of bulge of clay is here, that's how deep it is right now. So it's just over 1/4 of an inch that's down in there. Now this is the only time that you can stab down in the center of it. The reason I can do it now is when I start pulling out with the clay, it's going to kind of squish in back behind my fingers and it's going to fill that hole back in. I've seen people throw these big nice bowls and all of a sudden at the end of it they go, gee, I wonder how deep the bottom is. And they put a hole in it checking it. Well, they just left a hole in the bottom of their piece because it will never fill back in again. Now I can, later I can't. So now I've gotten it as deep as I want to go. Always stop early and then keep going down in later. Too many people go all the way through it and then they're like, and they have to start over again. So make sure that, gentlemen, make sure that you stop early and then go a little bit further, basically. So now the step that most people forget about is the next step. The next step is to create the floor of the piece. They'll open it up and then they'll start throwing the sides, and it's really hard to get that sides thin if you don't do this step. This step I put my hands down on the inside. I'm stronger with my right hand, so it's my right hand that's on the inside, and I'm going to pull directly at myself, trying to create a 90-degree angle on the inside of the piece. So I'm going to hold on. Notice my other hand is there for support. It's not pushing. It is just there so that I can keep track of where my hand is and I have something to lean against and rest on. So now I've opened it up. It should be pretty much straight on the outside and pretty much straight on the inside. There's a little bow on the outside, but that's pretty close. Now I'm going to compress the bottom. When I compress the bottom, I get the water out of the sponge as much as possible as I can. And I put my fingers on the top of the sponge and I kind of press through the sponge itself. This takes all the water out of the bottom and it makes the particles kind of press together again. As I expand it, the clay, it can let them kind of tear apart basically. And then as water sits down in the bottom of it, it soaks in and it will allow it to shrink too much basically when it's drying. If you ever have an S crack in the bottom of your piece after you're done with it, the reason for that is that you didn't compress it. It allowed too much water in, so when it was drying, the water went away and the clay couldn't collapse back together basically. Now I'm going to pull up the sides. So what I want to do is, again, take my foot off. I'm going to slow down a little bit. The first step you go faster when you're centering. Then the next steps as you go, you want to slow down a little bit each time. So now I'm going to go to working with pulling up the sides. This is really weird and uncomfortable, and I'm going to have to probably put your hands into the right spot. Most people don't get this right to start with. Your wrists are going to go up in the air. And you're going to be looking straight down at it, and your elbow needs to stay on your leg at all times until it gets like super tall. If it gets super tall, then I'm shoving my elbow in at my stomach when I'm working on it because I need something to stay stable. None of this should ever be something where the clay is just kind of pushing you around and you're letting it. Everything you're kind of stiffened up and you're working on it and you're making the clay do what you want it to do, not push you around. That's when people usually have troubles ever learning this, is when they don't like take control of what's going on with the clay and if they're leaning back too far. You need to be up, looking straight down at what you're doing and work on it. So I'm going to pull up the sides, and the first one that I usually do with my knuckle. It's like I'm knocking on the wheel head, and I push with the side of my knuckle, basically. Pushing with the side of my knuckle into my center finger of the other hand, and the other fingers are there to support it and stay strong. So I'm pushing in there. Notice my hands are connected as often as they possibly can be. I'm going to get this tall enough that I can't touch it anymore, but until then, I'm going to keep my hands connected. They work as a team then and not independently. So the first one, the reason I do it with my knuckle is that I need to be a little stronger than later on. So there I did the first pull. Run that water down the side of your hand as it's touching the clay to work on it. I'm going to collar it in between. What collaring in is pushing the clay in. You push inward and upward and run your hands up the sides. So there I just colored it into more of a cone. Don't do this so far that you can't get your hand down inside anymore. There's a little bit of a wobble on the top of this. I'm going to take care of that later by cutting the rim. I'm not going to do it until the end though. Push in on the bottom just a little bit more so I get a little bit more of a cylinder going on. Notice my elbows are down on my legs again. Can't tell you that enough. I'm going to get the water out of the inside so it's not just sitting in there and allowing it to soak in. Run a little water down my hand. Then the next step I'm going to go and I'm going to switch to my finger and my thumb kind of pushing together. And then I'm pushing kind of through the clay, fingertip to fingertip with the thumb there as a supporter. So pull some clay up. I get a ring started to begin with and pull up. The thing that people have to get used to is that it's a lot more pressure on the outside hand than the inside hand, and people don't understand that when they start throwing. They want to push harder with the hand that's inside and allow it to kind of whoop out into a bowl. You want to keep it going as straight up and down as possible to start with. Now the easiest shape is a bowl to do. Now some people wonder, why don't I start with a bowl then? The reason is that if I start with a bowl, you're never going to figure out how to do anything but a bowl. So I start with a cylinder so you learn how to do that, then we work up from there. Now I have a lot of clay down in the bottom here. I'm going to try to pick that up to bring that up with me. If I leave that there, it's going to be really heavy and not look very good. So now I'm going to push my finger in, and I'm going to actually get some clay. I'm going to get underneath it so I have that ring to kind of go with. And then I can kind of work my way up. So get my knuckle underneath it again. Pull it up. So you'll notice that was a pretty small piece of clay that I started with. And I have a relatively big piece of pottery here. You don't need much. It was kind of an awakening for me when I saw somebody throw this big, huge pot out of a piece of clay that was like this big. I assumed it was going to be like much more clay to get a big piece like that. They just learned to throw really, really thin and work up. So again, you'll notice that the rim is kind of uneven. I'm going to cut that down really quick here. I'm going to do one more pull to make sure it's nice and thin everywhere, fingertip to fingertip at this point. I can't touch from hand to hand anymore until I get up towards the top. As soon as I can, I get my hand over the top so that I can finish off. And don't continue throwing off the top of it. I let up, basically, and when I get to the top. Now, I'm going to take care of the rim here. I could, if I was throwing a pitcher or things that were my choice later on, I could use that little lump in it and create the pitcher mouth with it at that point. I don't want it there though, I want it to be a cylinder, so I'm going to use my needle tool. This is going to take getting used to. Your finger goes on the inside of it, finger in my left hand, I hold it in my right hand. I hold this strong, and I bridge my thumb over, and I start just slowly cutting into it. Make sure the needle is in the clay at all times and not coming in and out of the clay. I keep drawing it in until it touches my finger, and then I can pull up, and then you've got a ring of clay coming off the top there. That gives me a good rim on this. I'm going to use the sponge just a little bit and then use my fingers to level that out nice and even. Okay. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is going to probably drive you crazy. Well, not the next thing, the second next thing. I'm going to create a foot in this. You should always, every single time that you finish up a piece, you should cut a foot in. I did cut the tip of these off on all of them so that you could use this to create a foot. So I'm just pushing straight in so that it has a little kind of pull in down at the bottom there. This is the step that's going to drive you crazy to start with, because you're going to think I'm like making you do horrible things. But you're going to need to cut your piece open to see what's going on inside. And I promise you, once you learn how to throw well, you're going to be able to do it over and over again. Until you learn to throw well, each piece should be recycled. I cut across the bottom halfway, and then I pull up through the top, not from top down. So bottom, across, to get it started, and then pull straight up. Flip it over, and this is what the piece looks like inside. This is what you're going for. Most of you will throw with much wider at the bottom to start with. And the reason I make you cut it open is so that you do get thin all the way down. This is about a 1/4 inch all the way from top to bottom. This is a nice throw. And across the bottom there, you can see it's about the even everywhere. This is what you're going for on your pieces. Once you've gotten the cylinder down, then you can throw vases, pitchers, all that kind of stuff from the cylinder. You get it to this point, and then you shape for things. So until you're used to this, this goes back into the pug mill each time. So I'm just going to take the rest of this off of here. So that's going to be pugged. The wheel, when you clean the bats, you should never have to clean a bat in the sink. You should be able to just take it and go from the center out with the wood tool. Take the big amounts of clay out. I didn't get my clay too close to my tools so that I get it mixed up. Take the clay out of there. Look for any chunks that are left down inside of here. Put those with that. Use my sponge. I'm just going to squish it out with the water. Start in the center again and pull out. And clean enough bat to go up onto the bat holder. So again, you don't have to clean these in the sink. That's nice and easy. I am going to show you how to clean this up, which sounds a little weird, but the fact is that if I don't show you, people take forever in cleaning. There is some specific ways to clean this up. So there's different bats, or different pans that are on these. These specific ones that are on the yellow ones are the Brents. The Brents, what you need to do is find where the little tabs are, push the tabs down, and pull them up. The tab just makes it so it'll stick together nice and even. Make sure you know there's water and clay in here, so don't set it so that it'll drain out. I'm going to set this off to the side. I can take all this stuff to the sink as I'm going here. I'm going to just swivel this to the side as I try to pull that off. You can get the stuff to the sink and just pull straight off, it's fine. So these come off and go to the sink. You're going to learn very fast that there's a reason that you never ever set things on the bat head here, or on the wheel head. If you do and you accidentally lose your balance and you step on the pedal, people get showers, basically. So, and I've done it myself. It happens all the time. Just learn not to set anything on the wheel head. This happens relatively often that people will set this down as they're cleaning everything up. If this goes, it will splash everywhere. And yes, you have to clean it up if it splashes everywhere. So don't take care. Make sure you keep track of that.